Have you ever heard of crunk music? Chances are, if you're part of the new generation of hip-hop fans, the answer is no. But back in the early and mid-2000s, crunk was the real deal. It didn't matter where you were, be it on dance floors or inside a car with a heavy bass stereo, everyone was bopping the crunk sound. It was a whole movement, but now it's practically extinct. Back then, you couldn't step into a club without hearing a thunderous bass line and a very infectious hook blasting out of the speakers, with the DJs hyping away at the top of their lungs. The crunk sound was unapologetically loud, chaotic, and downright addictive. If you grew up in the 2000s like I did, you should know how crazy this sound was. It was literally designed for sweaty, overcrowded dance floors where people lost their minds the moment the beat dropped. The interesting thing about crunk is that the formula was simple. Turn the volume to the extreme, shout the lyrics, and let the bass do the rest. It was never a sound with deep messages or intricate wordplay, just raw, unfiltered energy. At the center of this wild, uncontrollable wave were two artists, or should I say three, Lil Jon and the Ying Yangs twins. These two powerhouses were the undisputed kings of crunk. There were others from their era, but they arguably stood out the most. They had the clubs in a chokehold, dropping bangers that made people act like they had no bills to pay in the morning. Some of the biggest hits were Get Low, Salt Shaker, and Snap Your Fingers. And these songs were everywhere, especially in the clubs. When these tracks came on, you had no choice but to turn up. But somewhere along the way, crunk started to lose its grip on the culture. As the pioneers fell off, so did the sound. In no time, the crunk wave vanished into thin air. So what really happened? Did hip-hop evolve past crunk, or was it because Lil Jon and the Ying Yangs twins couldn't sustain their fame? Let's break it all down. Now, it's absolutely normal if you don't know anything about the crunk sound. You're forgiven if you didn't catch the wave in the early 2000s, but what a time it was for those of us who did. We're the only ones who can relate to how massive and influential this sound actually was for hip-hop. To really understand crunk, you have to go back to the dirty, bass-heavy roots of Southern hip-hop. The sound was born from a wild mix of influences: Miami bass, Memphis rap, and Atlanta club culture. They were all blended to create something that felt rebellious, raw, and uncontrollable. You see, in this era, hip-hop had a balanced synergy. The East Coast rap scene was all about lyrical complexity and heavy bars, while the West Coast had a more laid-back gangsta vibe. Everyone loved hip-hop culture as it was in the 2000s, but the South wanted something different. They wanted high-octane energy, and crunk gave them exactly that. This wasn't music for sitting down and dissecting lyrics. Far from it. If you wanted that, then maybe you'd bop to Jay-Z or Eminem. Crunk was meant to be felt, not analyzed. The beats were aggressive, the bass was earthquake level, and the hooks were loud, repetitive, and impossible to ignore. It was the kind of music that made people jump on couches and lose all sense of responsibility. Even if you didn't catch the original wave of crunk, you probably caught a piece of its undisputed general, Lil Jon. Do you remember that song Turned Down for What? Yeah, that was Lil Jon. Lil Jon had been in the hip-hop space for way longer, and he was a master of crunk in every facet. His formula was simple, but highly effective. He had very minimal lyrics, but maximum hype in his songs. He made the 808s hit harder than a caffeine overdose, and his chant-like hooks always made crowds go crazy. Remember how intense Turn Down for What makes you feel in the club anytime it comes up? Well, that was the feeling with Lil Jon's crunk style, but on a much higher dimension. His ad-libs were so wild that they could actually start a riot. He was just so good? Anytime a DJ plays a Lil Jon produced or featured song back then, the energy in the room goes from 0 to 1,000 in seconds. Now, that's the real magic of crunk, and that's why people loved it. It was pure, unfiltered, chaotic fun. It didn't matter if you were in a club, a house party, or a car with busted speakers, crunk made you move. Now, you're probably wondering, how did a sound so addictive and infectious disappear from the face of the earth? Well, it's not black and white, but it had something to do with the kings of crunk and how they lost their crown. There were a lot of artists doing crunk music in the early 2000s. Most of them came from Atlanta, with the likes of Bone Crusher, Trillville, and the Ying Yangs twins blowing up. But there were others like David Banner, Pastor Troy, and Lil Scrappy who were making some serious waves at that time too. Even Usher and Ciara had a taste of the crunk style with their hit songs Yeah and Goodies respectively. But the biggest stars that championed and took crunk to the mainstream and beyond were Lil Jon and the Ying Yang twins. These guys weren't just artists, they were a whole movement. You couldn't step into a club, turn on the radio, or even watch MTV without hearing their voices, their beats, and their wild energy taking over. Others were good, but these two were the real deal. Oh, and for all the young people watching, MTV used to only play music videos and stuff, not just reality TV, but I digress. Lil Jon's journey to crunk supremacy didn't happen overnight. Before he became the loudest man in hip-hop, he was just another Atlanta DJ and producer, grinding behind the scenes. But Jon had a vision. He always thought hip-hop needed more energy, more chaos, more adrenaline, so that way he could give people a different experience on the dance floor. So he started crafting beats that felt less like music and more like an open invitation to do something crazy. The ad-libs were the real sauce in Lil Jon's music. They gave his sound that extra flair and they became the centerpiece of his evolution. He knew how to tweak his ad-libs in a way that made them feel like he was actually speaking to you. He wanted people to lose control and he was able to achieve that with these incredible ad-libs. You don't even need alcohol in your system to get activated, but if you've had a shot or two and Lil Jon gets on the turntable, good God, you'll jump like you've never jumped before. His style became so iconic that even people who didn't listen to crunk knew exactly who was behind them. The Ying Yang twins, on the other hand, were two of the wildest, most unpredictable voices that championed the crunk sound in the South. It's difficult to call them rappers. Their sound felt more like a mixture of rapping, chanting, growling, and whispering. And yeah, it was that weird, but they turned every song into a madhouse. Their breakout hits like Salt Shaker and Whisper Song took the crunk wave to new heights. Salt Shaker had the club shaking massively, while Whisper Song got people whispering with the wildest energy ever. But the real magic happened when the twins teamed up with Lil Jon. It was a collaboration the world didn't know she needed at the time. They literally took over with their hit single, Get Low. The second you heard the first few notes of this song, you already knew everybody was about to lose their minds. Their hyper-aggressive Salt Shaker song was also a collab with Lil Jon too. No one does it like him, if we're being honest. By the mid-2000s, crunk had officially taken over. It wasn't just a subgenre anymore, it was mainstream. Every party, every club, and every workout playlist had some Lil Jon produced anthem ready to send people into a frenzy. Those hit singles by Usher and Ciara that we mentioned earlier, yeah, Lil Jon was either a writer, producer, or both on those songs. He was the go-to person for any mainstream artist who wanted a taste of the crunk sound. It was at this moment that the sound felt unstoppable. It felt like it was here to stay forever. It had the energy, the hype, and the cultural dominance that few genres ever attained. But here's the thing about music that thrives on pure adrenaline. Eventually, the rush fades away. And the moment that happened, crunk went from defining an entire era to becoming a relic and shadow of its former glory. If you're wondering why that happened, well, it's simple. Crunk refused to evolve. The first cracks in the wall started showing when the crunk sound became too predictable. Everything basically remained the same. From the beats to the chants and its wild hooks, they all followed one formula. By now, y'all should know that music is forever evolving. There's always a new wave, a new trend, a different energy. And for a genre that thrived on being aggressive and unpredictable, once it started feeling too familiar, the magic began to fade. It's important to note that at the same time, hip-hop was evolving. Southern rap didn't disappear, but the sound started shifting. Trap was on the rise. Artists like T.I., Jeezy, and Gucci Mane brought a darker, more cinematic sound to the South. Instead of party anthems, people started yearning for street tales and storytelling. Then came Lil Wayne, the man who took the trap wave to unprecedented heights. His mixtape run in the late 2000s was legendary, and it changed everything. Wayne was from the South, but his style wasn't crunk. He was lyrical, clever, and versatile. Suddenly, hip-hop wasn't just about energy anymore. It was about bars, metaphors, and melody. Even though Atlanta legends like Outkast had already been proving that the South had layers beyond crunk, the rise of Lil Wayne and others ushered in a new era. You know what's wild about all of this? This trap style that took the shine away from crunk was actually derived from crunk itself. It was the crunk sound that inspired the spare production and heavy drum machine used in trap music. As if that wasn't enough, auto-tune also took over. Artists like T-Pain, Kanye West, and later Future introduced a smoother, more melodic sound that took over radio. Compared to the futuristic, almost hypnotic vibes of auto-tuned records, crunk started to feel loud for the sake of being loud. It started to feel strange to hip-hop fans, with people complaining of it being too loud compared to the hottest hip-hop artists at the time. But the real nail in the coffin that ended everything? Lil Jon pivoted. Instead of fighting to keep crunk alive, he jumped into the booming world of EDM, and let's be real, he thrived. Lil Jon was always smart. He always knew crunk wasn't going to live forever, so he transformed himself. He knew his high-energy production, signature ad-libs, and love for bass-heavy music fit perfectly into electronic dance music. So, for those that have heard his global hit Turn Down for What, that was Lil Jon's EDM era. He was even arguably more successful in the EDM genre compared to crunk. But that also depends on who you ask. There's no doubt he was an EDM superstar though. While Lil Jon thrived following the death of crunk music, the Ying Yang twins disappeared from the mainstream. While Lil Jon was reinventing himself, taking the bold move to try a new genre, the twins were dealing with financial struggles, label issues, and personal setbacks. At one point, they even revealed they weren't making money from some of their biggest hits. Without a strong business foundation or a musical reinvention, they slowly faded into the background. By the early 2010s, crunk was basically gone. The clubs had moved on. Hip-hop had moved on. The world moved on. But did the sound really die? Now, I don't think it did. Crunk might not be running the game anymore, but it never truly died. The DNA of crunk is still alive in today's rap, lurking beneath the surface, just waiting for the right artist to bring it back in full force. The fact that trap music went on to reach the level it did is another sign that crunk never actually died. People just took tiny pieces of it to create a different sound. A lot of the modern trap music you've been bopping to in the past decade borrowed a lot from crunk. While there aren't a lot of people doing the heavy crunk sound today, one of the most obvious torchbearers still pushing the subgenre is Duke Deuce. He's an artist from Memphis, and he's been on a mission to bring crunk back, and he's not shy about it. He always sampled the classic crunk sounds, aggressive ad-libs and pounding bass in his music, but will he make it mainstream? Well, that remains to be seen, but he's playing his part. Though artists are not outright making crunk music today, the likes of Megan Thee Stallion and City Girls have tapped into crunk-style production in some of their biggest hits. Are you surprised? Well, I told you it wasn't dead. Tracks like Act Up and Body have that same call and response energy, chant-like hooks, and bounce-heavy beats that made crunk a club banger. The only difference is that they're rapping with a new school twist. We've got to give Lil Jon a special shout out too. Every now and then he pops back up, reminding us why he was the king of crunk. It's becoming more rare these days though, and his EDM hits are still being played in clubs around the world today. He's proof that high energy music will always have a place in the culture. It'll only keep getting reinvented. So the big question is, will crunk ever fully make a comeback? Well, to be honest, it's hard to say. The music industry has changed. Today's hip-hop is more about melody, atmosphere, and social media virality than raw aggression. Plus, younger listeners might not even know what crunk is outside of a TikTok trend or two. But here's the thing, hip-hop is cyclical. Trends always come back around, just like how boom bap rap had a revival and how early 2000s R&B is making a comeback now. All it takes is the right artist, the right song, and the right moment. Even fashion is cyclical, so all hope is not lost. No one knows when it's going to be, but crunk will make that comeback, and it's going to be heavy when it does. Because when a proper crunk beat drops and the bass hits just right, everybody's still going to lose their minds. So what do you think? Is crunk really dead, or is it just waiting for its moment to come back? Share your thoughts in the comment section below, and while you're here, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into hip-hop's greatest eras. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.